Ladies and gentlemen, have you ever jolted awake at 3:12 a.m. or found yourself staring at the ceiling at 4:27 a.m. wondering why now? You reach for your phone, try to fall back asleep, or simply lie there in frustration. But what if this wasn't an accident? What if this was not insomnia, but an invitation? You weren't interrupted, you were summoned. You see, between 3 and 5 in the morning, something profound happens. In the silence of the world, the soul becomes louder. The distractions of the day haven't begun, and your heart is still enough to hear eternity speak. This isn't about superstition. This is about recognizing when God calls. And if you miss that call, you might miss the very turning point your life was waiting for. So stay with me, because in the next few minutes, I'll share with you 5 holy practices to do immediately when you wake up between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. These aren't just habits. They are sacred movements of the soul that could change the course of your life. The first thing you must do is acknowledge the presence that woke you. Whisper, "Yes, Lord, I'm listening." This simple assent opens the door to divine guidance. Your yes is your alignment. It's not about having the answers. It's about being available. The songs are timeless cries of the human heart. Joy, sorrow, doubt, and praise, all wrapped in sacred words. Keep a song near your bed. Psalm 63, for example, "On my bed I remember you. I think of you through the watches of the night." This anchors your wakefulness in God's word. At this hour, self-deception is thinner. Ask, where have I strayed? Who do I need to forgive? Where is my soul clinging to pride? This is spiritual purification, not guilt. The night is honest and God is close. Resist the urge to pray with a list. Just sit. Breathe. Listen. This is adoration without demand, the kind of prayer that transforms not just your situation, but your soul. God often speaks not in thunder, but in stillness. There's something sacred about standing in the gap for someone else. At 4 a.m., your intercession carries power. Pray for the lonely, the sick, the wandering. When you forget yourself, you find yourself. That's the paradox of grace. There is a quiet hour in the depths of the night, when the world lies still, when the distractions of the day have faded and time seems suspended between what was and what is to come. It is the hour when the soul stirs, not by the noise of alarms or the responsibilities of schedules, but by something far deeper, far more sacred. To wake between the hours of 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. is not simply a biological coincidence or a restless turning in sleep. It is, more often than not, a divine prompting, a sacred call that pierces through the veil of ordinary awareness. In these hours, something mystical happens. The clamor of our desires is silent. The ambitions that chase us through the daylight hours take their rest. What remains is the purest version of the self, unmasked, unguarded, and unexpectedly open. The early morning wakefulness is not random. It is not meaningless. Rather, it is a spiritual invitation. It is God reaching gently into your night and whispering, "Come away with me." And yet, How often do we roll over, dismissing this moment as inconvenience or insomnia? How often do we miss the sacred because it is veiled in the ordinary? Scripture has long held the night in deep regard. The Psalms speak of the night watches as moments of communion with the divine. I lie awake thinking of you, meditating on you through the night, says the psalmist. The night is not empty, it is holy. The early hours are not wasted, they are consecrated. They are a hidden altar where only those willing to wake, to watch, and to listen may approach. It is no wonder that saints, mystics, and prophets throughout history often spoke of waking in the night, to pray, to write, to listen. They knew something we have forgotten. When the soul is awakened at such an hour, it is not a disruption, it is a summons. Think about how we usually respond when this happens. We worry about not getting enough sleep. We groan at the thought of a long day ahead. But what if this disturbance was not a problem to fix, but a portal to walk through? What if you began to see these hours as holy ground, as moments where God removes the veil and speaks, not in the chaos, but in the calm? This isn't superstition, it's spiritual sensitivity. The created world has rhythms, and so does the soul. There are times when the spirit is more attuned to the eternal, and this sacred window between 3 and 5 in the morning is often one of them. This sacred stirring is not given to everyone at all times. When it happens to you, take notice. Something is being offered, something is being revealed. You are being invited not into more doing, but into deeper being. It's a time to look inward, to acknowledge your frailty, your longing, your wounds, and in the stillness, to hear the quiet voice of the one who heals. It's a time to remember that your life is not your own, that there is something transcendent and beautiful calling you higher, deeper, further. In the modern world, saturated with noise and stimulation, these early morning hours are one of the last sacred refuges left for the soul. You may ask, why me, why now? And the answer is simple though profound. Because you are ready. Or perhaps because you are in need. Sometimes God wakes us, not to give us an answer, but to make us aware of the question we have buried beneath busyness. Sometimes he wakes us to draw our attention not to what's happening around us, but to what's happening within. When the soul is dry, he calls us to the well. When the heart is broken, he whispers peace. When the mind is chaotic, he offers clarity, not through thunder, but through silence. What you must understand is that these moments are gifts, and like all gifts, they require a response. You can choose to treat it as a meaningless event, or you can receive it as an invitation. When you wake in those hours, you are standing at the threshold of sacred time. Will you step through? Will you listen? Or will you dismiss it as nothing? To recognize the spiritual nature of this early morning awakening is to begin living with awareness that God is active in your life in ways beyond your control, outside your plans, and beyond your comprehension. He is not always speaking during the loud parts of our day. Sometimes he waits until the world is quiet, so you will finally hear him. And when you do, you will find that your soul was not longing for more sleep, it was longing for him. The next time your eyes open in the dim light of pre-dawn, don't rush to close them again. Don't reach for distractions. Sit in the stillness. Listen for the whisper. Something sacred is being offered. You are not disturbed. You are chosen. The hour is not random. It is holy, and you are not alone. You are being invited into the mystery of divine intimacy. The question is not why you are awake. The question is, are you willing to listen? In the quiet depths of the early morning, between the hours of 3 and 5, there exists a stillness that is not merely the absence of noise, but the presence of something sacred. This hour carries with it a mystery, a profound sense that something hidden is now being revealed. It is a sacred moment, not because we declare it so, but because heaven itself leans near to earth. The veil that normally separates the visible from the invisible, the temporal from the eternal, becomes thin, almost transparent. And in that space, the soul is given a unique opportunity to commune with the divine in ways that the busyness of daylight often obscures. This veil is not a physical curtain, but a spiritual reality. In our ordinary lives, we move through time surrounded by matter, distracted by responsibilities, tethered to concerns. We live, in a sense, under the weight of what is seen. But the unseen, the eternal, the holy, the dimension of heaven, is always near, always present, though we rarely perceive it. That there are times, moments of grace, when the veil is lifted or thinned, and we catch a glimpse of something far greater than ourselves. Between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., this thinning is not imagined. It is felt in the soul. The silence is deeper. The air is heavier with presence. It is as if God has stepped closer, as if the distance between his world and ours has collapsed into a sacred closeness. Many people who awaken in these hours report an unusual clarity, a sense of peace, or an awareness of being watched over. Some experience tears without cause, emotions stirred from nowhere, or thoughts that do not feel like their own. These are not anomalies to be dismissed. They are signs. The soul, when undistracted by the world, becomes aware of what has always been true, that the eternal realm is not elsewhere but here, surrounding us, just beyond the thin veil. In this holy hour, we are given the grace to perceive it, even if only faintly. The early church understood this intimately. Monastics would rise in the dead of night, not because it was convenient, but because they knew that in the night the voice of God echoes with less resistance. They knew that angels minister in the dark, and that the Spirit often moves when the world sleeps. There is a tradition, forgotten by many today, that the night is not merely absence of light, but the presence of mystery. And mystery is the language of heaven. When you wake in these hours, it is not just your body stirring. It is your spirit responding to a summons. Something sacred is unfolding, and you have been invited to witness it. This hour is also a battleground. Not all that lies beyond the veil is comforting. Scripture tells us that spiritual warfare is real, that unseen forces operate in realms we cannot always discern. Between 3 and 5 a.m. the veil thins, not only for heavenly communion, but also for spiritual alertness. You are not called merely to receive peace, but to awaken in vigilance. The world around you may sleep, but the spiritual world never slumbers. In these moments, discernment is sharpened. You may sense anxiety, unrest, or a strange burden, and these too are calls to prayer. Do not fear them. You are being given sight, insight, and intercession. When you wake in this time, you are being called not to panic, but to participate in something larger than yourself. You are not just a soul adrift in the dark. You are a child of light, being awakened for a purpose. Consider also the rhythm of Christ's own life. He often went away in the night to pray. Gethsemane was not a daylight event. It was in the dark and the solitude of the garden, between the betrayal and the cross, that he wrestled and surrendered. The saints and mystics, too, often found their most profound revelations not in crowded temples, but in the sacred solitude of early morning hours. Why? Because they understood that when the veil thins and the world stills, the voice of the eternal becomes unmistakable. When you find yourself awake in this sacred window of time, resist the urge to see it as mere restlessness. Do not fill the moment with noise. Do not reach for your phone or rush back to sleep. Instead, become still. Acknowledge the presence that surrounds you. Offer a word of prayer. Ask to see what you have been blind to. Ask to hear what you have long ignored. Speak your heart, but more importantly, listen. The veil is thin. The whisper of God is not distant in this hour. He is near, nearer than your own breath, and he is not merely watching. He is inviting. In this holy hour between 3 and 5, something profound is happening. The curtain is parting, the eternal is drawing near. If you respond, if you step into this moment with reverence and awareness, you will begin to see your entire life differently. You will realize that heaven is not somewhere else. It is here, now, always present, always close, but often unseen, until the veil thins and we awaken. When you awaken in the silence between 3 and 5 in the morning, you are not simply waking from sleep. You are being invited into a moment of profound interior reflection. This is not an accidental hour. It is a sacred interval carved out by grace itself. It is in these hours that the soul, undistracted by the rhythms of the day, is most prepared to be examined. This is the time to take a long, honest look inward, not as an act of self-condemnation, but of spiritual awakening. It is an opportunity to ask questions that only the quiet can answer. What is the true condition of my soul? What has taken root in my heart? Am I truly living in communion with the divine, or have I wandered into the wastelands of distraction and spiritual slumber? The soul, unlike the body, does not cry out in pain when it is wounded. Its injuries are often silent, hidden beneath the surface of appearances. It is only in moments of silence and stillness, such as those found in the early morning, that we are able to feel where we have grown cold, indifferent, or lost. Reflection in this sacred hour is not simply an exercise in thought. It is a spiritual act of returning to the truth about our desires, our failures, our longings, and above all, our relationship with God. We often spend our lives tending to external duties while neglecting the most vital part of our being, the soul. But in this hour, heaven itself seems to press close to our inner world and gently whisper, "Come back. Look within. There is more." To reflect on the soul is to ask, what am I feeding it? What am I clinging to that has dulled my love for the divine? Are my daily choices forming me into someone more holy, more compassionate, more aligned with eternal truth? Or am I drifting into spiritual complacency, justifying lukewarmness as normalcy? These are not questions for public dialogue. They are private inquiries, whispered between the soul and its creator in the sacred sanctuary of one's interior life. And what better time to do this sacred work than the hour when the world is still asleep and your spirit is most awake. Reflection does not begin with answers. It begins with honesty. It begins when you allow yourself to sit in silence without distraction and let the truth of who you are rise to the surface. Not who you pretend to be, not who others think you are, but who you are before God. That is the deepest reality. And to gaze into that space requires courage. But it is in that gaze that transformation begins. The soul, once seen, begins to heal. The soul, once acknowledged, begins to grow. This hour is not for judgment, but for illumination. It is not about tallying sins or performing rituals of guilt. It is about opening the door to grace. Grace does not shame you, it beckons you forward. Grace whispers, you were made for more, you are loved. Now come and be restored. It is in this hour of darkness that the first glimmers of light begin to shine within. The act of examining the soul is itself an act of hope. Hope that we are not defined by our wounds, but by our willingness to be made new. In this sacred window, you are not alone. The Spirit is present, drawing your attention not to despair, but to depth. When you reflect in this hour, you may begin to see patterns in your life. Cycles of fear, patterns of pride, recurring moments of self-centeredness, and instead of being condemned by them, you are offered clarity. To see clearly is a gift, because what is seen can be surrendered, and what is surrendered can be transformed. God does not ask for perfect souls. He asks for honest ones. And this hour is your time to be radically honest, radically open. Consider, too, that this time may reveal not just your failures, but your calling. What burden is on your heart? What injustice unsettles your peace? What love remains unexpressed in your life? The soul carries dreams planted by God Himself, but we rarely pause long enough to listen. When the noise of the world is silenced, the whisper of purpose can finally be heard. And that purpose is never just about personal gain. It is about becoming a vessel of divine goodness in a world that desperately needs light. So if you find yourself awake in these quiet, holy hours, resist the temptation to fill the silence. Don't reach for distraction. Let the stillness do its work. Let your heart be searched. Let your soul be known. The purpose of waking at this hour may not be to get answers, but to meet the one who holds them. And in that meeting you will begin to see not just the condition of your soul, but the possibility of its renewal. You will understand that this hour is not just for rest. It is for return. A return to your essence, a return to your purpose, a return to God. In the stillness between 3 and 5 a.m., there exists a rare and powerful spiritual current, one that invites us not just to pray, but to pray with intentionality and holy expectation. This is not ordinary prayer, not the kind offered in haste or distraction. It is sacred communication forged in silence and trust. In this hour, the soul has a unique openness. The noise of the world is receded, and your spirit, uncluttered by the day's worries, can speak and hear with greater clarity. You are not merely asking. You are entering into a divine conversation where heaven leans in, listening. To pray intentionally means to move past vague requests and recited phrases. It is to come before God with your full self, mind, heart, body, and soul. It is to recognize that you are not just tossing words into the void, but entering into the presence of a living, personal, holy being who desires communion with you. This is not the time for formality. It is the time for honesty, for boldness, for openness. Bring your fears, your hopes, your struggles, your praise. Speak plainly and trust that God does not require eloquence. He desires truth. But prayer in this hour is not just about expression. It is also about expectation. This is where many fall short. We pray, but we do not expect. We ask, but we doubt whether the answer will come. Yet to pray with expectation is to pray in alignment with faith. It is to believe that you are not just heard, but that your words move something in the divine order. It is to believe that God not only listens, but acts. This confidence is not arrogance. It is trust. It is the trust of a child who knows his Father is good. Prayer becomes powerful and it flows from this trust. When you approach the divine, not with a spirit of begging, but with a heart that believes, you must understand that your prayers are not small. When prayed in faith, they transcend time and space. They enter the throne room of heaven and are received as fragrant offerings. The early morning hours, a time when the veil feels thinner, when the mystery of God seems closer. Your prayer, whispered in the dark, can set miracles into motion. This is the sacred mystery of divine human cooperation. God does not need your words, but he chooses to work through them. And so your intentional prayer becomes an act of participation in the work of heaven on earth. Consider also the discipline it takes to pray in this hour. You could roll over and go back to sleep. You could let the discomfort of early waking deter you. But when you choose to pray instead, you are offering a sacrifice of comfort, of sleep, of convenience. And this sacrifice is not unnoticed. Scripture is full of examples where those who rise early to seek the Lord are met with divine favor. There is something about this intentional offering that unlocks spiritual treasures not found in casual moments. It is not about the time of day itself, but the heart with which you respond to that divine nudge. Rising to pray in the early hour is a statement. God, I am available. Speak, I am listening. Act, I am ready. Prayer with expectation also transforms your attitude. It shifts your perspective. When you believe God is truly involved, when you believe something is happening, even when you cannot see it, you begin to live with a quiet confidence. You no longer see prayer as a ritual, but as a catalyst. You start to carry your petitions with peace, not anxiety, because you have handed them over to a power far greater than your own. And when your heart is attuned to expectation, you also become more alert to the answers. What once looked like coincidence now looks like providence. What once seemed delayed now looks like divine timing. You begin to see with spiritual eyes. And let us not forget that intentional, expectant prayer is not only about asking, it is also about alignment. It is not simply a means to change your circumstances, it is a means to change you. As you pray, God often reorders your affections. He reshapes your desires, clarifies your motives, refines your spirit. You may begin praying for one thing and discover in the process that what you truly needed was something else. This, too, is the work of grace. Prayer is not a one-way transaction. It is a transformative relationship. And in this quiet hour, transformation can begin at the very root. Finally, to pray intentionally with expectation is to live with anticipation of God's presence throughout the day. This kind of prayer does not end when the words stop. It lingers in your spirit. It influences your decisions. It follows you into your interactions, your thoughts, your work. You become a vessel through which the morning's sacred encounter pours into the world. You carry a deeper peace, a clearer purpose, and a greater awareness of the unseen. So when you find yourself awake between 3 and 5 a.m., don't dismiss it as restlessness. Recognize it as invitation. Kneel if you can. Sit in the quiet if you must. But pray. Pray with all your heart. Not out of habit, but with intentionality. Not with fear, but with faith. Expect something to shift. Expect light to break through. Expect that the one who hears you is already moving. Because when you pray with expectation, you don't just touch heaven. You invite heaven to touch earth. Then the quiet of the early morning, between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., when the world lies silent and the spirit is most perceptive, journaling becomes more than a personal habit. It becomes a spiritual act. This time, marked by stillness, is not merely for prayer and reflection, but also for recording the sacred impressions and insights that rise within the soul. There is something extraordinary that happens in these early hours. The usual noise of the day is gone. The distractions of daily life are asleep. The soul becomes a mirror, more capable of catching divine light. And when you journal during this moment, you are capturing the whisper of heaven on paper. To journal the revelation that comes to you is to take seriously the movements of the spirit within. It is to believe that your interior life is a sacred space in which God speaks. Revelation does not always come in dramatic visions or loud signs. Often it comes subtly, a sentence that echoes in your heart, a phrase that stirs your conscience, a thought that illuminates your mind like the flicker of dawn. These moments are not accidental. They are seeds from the divine, waiting to be planted deep in your understanding and allowed to grow. But if you do not write them down, they can fade as quickly as they came. Journaling is how you honor these moments. It is an act of spiritual stewardship. When you write down what God impresses upon you, you are saying, "This matters. I do not take it lightly." You become a scribe of your own sacred journey, recording not just thoughts, but encounters. The pages of your journal become a testimony of grace, a history of how you are being shaped and refined. What seemed like fleeting insight in the moment becomes over time a map of transformation. You begin to see how your heart is being formed, how your desires are shifting, how your understanding of God and self is deepening. It is important to write freely and honestly in these moments. Do not edit your soul. Do not worry if the words are perfect or if the grammar is correct. This is not for publication. It is for communion. Write down what you hear in prayer, what you feel stirring within, what dreams linger from the night, what scriptures leap off the page. Write down your questions, your doubts, your joys, your sorrow. All of it matters. All of it is real. All of it is part of your story with God. This kind of journaling cultivates attentiveness. When you expect to receive revelation, take the time to record it. You begin to listen more deeply. Your spiritual senses sharpen. You become more aware of patterns, promptings, and the quiet movements of grace. You begin to see your life not as a series of random events, but as a tapestry being woven with intention and purpose. And as you journal, you are able to trace the thread. Moreover, journaling in this sacred hour reinforces a truth that revelation is ongoing. God has not stopped speaking. He is still revealing, still guiding, still calling. When you write down what you sense or receive, you become a participant in that ongoing dialogue. You realize that the spiritual life is not static, it is alive. And your journal becomes a living witness to this dynamic journey. On days when your faith feels dry or distant, you can look back and remember the mornings when heaven seemed near. On days when you feel lost, you can find direction in the words you once received in the quiet. There is also a discipline in this practice. It teaches patience and reverence. Some mornings you may not feel inspired. You may feel nothing at all. But you write anyway. You show up, and in showing up you create space. Sometimes the act of writing itself draws out the revelation. What begins as a simple reflection becomes a moment of clarity. What starts as a question leads to unexpected insight. This is the mystery and grace of journaling with expectation. It allows the sacred to unfold. And let us not forget the legacy this creates. Your journal is not only for you. Someday it may speak to others. It may encourage your children, inspire a friend, or become a record of faith that outlives you. The pages you fill in solitude may one day echo with strength in someone else's wilderness. This is how God uses our small, hidden acts for larger purposes. What you receive and write down in humility may become a source of light for others. So, when you find yourself awake between 3 and 5 a.m. and you feel a stirring in your soul, do not simply sit with it. Write it down. Keep a pen and notebook near your bed. Make space to record what you sense, what you see, what you learn. Write as if heaven is speaking directly to you, because sometimes it is, and in writing you receive more. You make your heart a vessel ready for fresh revelation. You open yourself to be changed. Day by day, word, because those early morning hours are not empty. They are full of divine possibility. And journaling is your way of saying, I am listening, I am learning, I am ready. In those quiet moments, your pen becomes a bridge between earth and heaven, and your journal becomes a sanctuary where the sacred takes root. At the edge of night and the breaking of dawn, when the world is hushed and your heart is most vulnerable, there exists a sacred moment, one that invites surrender. To speak a prayer of surrender between the hours of 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. is not a ritual of weakness, but a courageous act of trust. It is not the language of resignation, but of offering. In these quiet hours, your soul has the clearest view of God's grandeur and your own. This is not the time to control or to demand. It is the time to release. Surrender in prayer is the most powerful declaration of faith. It says, I no longer rely solely on my strength, my intelligence, my will. I entrust myself to the one who sees more than I see, knows more than I know, and loves me more than I can comprehend. When you wake in the early morning and are stirred with restlessness, heaviness, or a strange alertness that defies sleep, it may be the Spirit calling you to let go. It is the moment to open your hands, literally and spiritually, and say, take this, Lord. I cannot carry it anymore. Many people believe surrender is defeat, but in the realm of the Spirit, surrender is victory. It is the act that breaks pride, softens fear, and purifies intentions. The soul that surrenders is the soul that has begun to mature. A child clenches tightly to what they do not want to lose. An adult of faith releases what they never owned in the first place. This kind of surrender does not mean passivity. It means receptivity. It is active trust. It is a willingness to let God lead you even when you do not understand the path. In these hours, speak the truth you have tried to avoid. Say what you are afraid to say during the daylight hours. Tell God that you do not know what to do, that you are tired of trying to fix everything on your own, that you are done pretending. God already knows the contents of your heart, but when you speak them aloud in surrender, you are allowing Him to heal, to guide, and to take over. This is not about giving up responsibility, but rather placing your life under divine authority. It is saying, here are my dreams, my failures, my anxieties, my plans. Take them. I trust that your way is better. Surrender is not something you do once and for all. It is daily, often hourly, sometimes moment by moment. And this early morning hour, this divine intersection of night and day, is the most fitting time to renew that surrender. Why? Because it is a time uncluttered by the expectations of the day. It is when the ego is still quiet, when the masks have been removed, and when your rawest, most honest self emerges. This is when surrender is most pure, when it is not performed for others to see, but offered in the secret place where only God sees. When you pray a prayer of surrender, use simple words. You do not need poetic language or theological vocabulary. Just speak from your depths. Say, I trust you. Say, I give this to you. Say, let your will be done, not mine. These phrases are not weak. They are holy. They are the words that invite heaven's order into your earthly chaos. They shift your posture from grasping to releasing, from anxiety to peace. And what happens after you surrender? Often, the circumstances do not immediately change, but you do. Your spirit becomes lighter, your mind becomes clearer, your heart begins to beat in rhythm with divine purpose. Sometimes, surrender leads to answers, sometimes it leads to silence. But even the silence is a sacred echo, affirming that God has heard you and is working behind the veil. The miracle of surrender is not that you gain control, but that you stop needing it. In time, you begin to see that surrender is not only the right response. It is the only response that brings lasting peace. You cannot control every outcome. You cannot foresee every consequence. But you can choose to trust the one who holds all outcomes and sees beyond all consequences. That is the freedom of surrender. It does not bind you. It liberates you. So when you wake in those mysterious early hours, speak a prayer of surrender. Do not rush it. Do not treat it like a task to check off. Let it be a holy offering. Let your heart kneel even if your body cannot. Let your soul rise even as your words fall softly into the silence. Surrender your past, what you cannot change. Surrender your present, what you cannot control. Surrender your future, what you cannot predict. In doing so, you're not losing your life. You are placing it into the hands of the one who shaped it in the first place. This act, though simple, is the gateway to deep spiritual transformation. It is how fear is replaced by peace, how confusion gives way to clarity, how wandering turns into purpose. Surrender in the early morning is like planting a seed of faith that will grow throughout your day. And every time you surrender, you make more room in your life for grace, for love. So speak that prayer, trust the one who hears it, and let the morning light find you free. This hour isn't cursed. It's consecrated. To wake between 3 and 5 a.m. is to receive a hidden gift, a mysterious calling few notice and fewer still respond to. But if you respond even once, with a quiet yes, you open your life to a wisdom beyond this world. These 5 practices are not rules. They are pathways. And every morning you walk them, you draw nearer to the one who called you awake. So the next time you find yourself awake before dawn, don't roll over. Don't reach for your phone. Rise, listen, speak, examine, intercede, because heaven may be whispering, this is your hour.